Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you had a great weekend. Let me start with some macro thoughts. More countries defaulted on Eurobonds last year than any time since 1983, according to Moody's Investor Services. That's via Paul Wallace. 4 countries defaulted: Belize, Mozambique, Republic of Congo, and Venezuela. So far in 2018, Barbados has missed payments on external debt. Currency war erupts with China, seems to lower the yuan in the $5.1 trillion per day foreign exchange market. They're using the price of the yuan as a response to the tariff war. Let these two charts show why my primary interest in the crypto market is Bitcoin. Ultimately, if the bullish crypto narrative is true, the king will be Bitcoin, says Peter L. Brent. He also says that Bitcoin came within spitting distance of his initial target of 7,747, and we're approaching that level again. I like this photograph of the London sunset. This is by Cool Pics. One of my favorite words, along with serendipity, is Petri Chaw. Rob G. McFarlane said, word of the heatwave day, Petri Chaw, the fresh, rich smell that accompanies rain when it falls on dry earth after a long period of hot weather. First coined in 1964 in Nature. Neil Armstrong, 240,000 miles from Earth. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Speaks these words to more than 1 billion people listening at home. Of course, the landing on the moon is the subject of a conspiracy theory, and one of the longest lasting ones that I can recall. This leopard brought down a kudu, then disappeared into the bush, only to emerge with a tiny cub. The mother and cub then feasted on their prize, Botswana. President Trump tweeted to the Iranian President Rouhani, never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. And this follows a televised speech in which Hassan Rouhani told the American president, do not play with the lion's tail. You will regret it forever. Addressing Iranian diplomats, Rouhani said America should know that peace with Iran is the mother of all peace, and war with Iran is the mother of all wars. Rouhani scoffed at Mr. Trump's threat to halt Iranian oil exports, saying anyone who understands the rudiments of politics doesn't say we will stop Iran's oil exports. We have been the guarantor of the regional waterways security throughout history. Rouhani has suggested Iran may block Gulf oil exports if its own trade is disrupted, a proposal backed by the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In 2013, which represented a different moment, there was a rapprochement between Barack Obama and Hassan Rouhani, and I wrote a piece called The Two Husseins, but obviously we've gone away from that convergence. A no-deal Brexit risks civil unrest, the boss of Amazon in the UK has warned in the English Times. Outstanding essay, in-depth essay about inside China's surveillance state. Zhejiang Hangzhou No. 11 High School on the fringes of downtown Hangzhou in eastern China is a green, peaceful seeming place to learn. Gazebo-like structures nestle among lush foliage, grey stone sculptures enact eternal dioramas, and Japanese maples gently fan placid lakes. It is also a digital panopticon, a surveillance system powered by facial recognition and artificial intelligence tracks the state school's 1,010 pupils, informing teachers which students are late or have missed class, while in the cafe their menu choices leave a digital dietary footprint that staff can monitor to see who is gorging on too much fatty food. Welcome to China, where artificial intelligence is being pressed into service as a handmaiden to an authoritarian government. The idea of constant monitoring is not unprecedented in China. Indeed, the name of the government's 2020 project, Sui Liang, or Sharp Eyes, is a throwback to a Communist Party slogan, "The people have sharp eyes." Beijing has about 850,000 informants patrolling its streets, according to state media. Then saying, when the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham envisaged his panopticon penitentiary in the late 18th century, a circular building with an inspection tower at its centre, the idea was that inmates would never know if they were being observed or not. This simple idea in architecture would offer a new mode of obtaining power over mind, Bentham wrote. At present, a good financial credit score handed out by some companies and operating rather like a loyalty program can confer benefits such as waived deposits on shared bikes or preferential loan rates. A poor social credit score, by comparison, could jeopardize a university place, rule out certain jobs, and even limit travel. More than 10.5 million people have been barred from buying airline or high-speed train tickets, according to the Supreme Court, since a debtors list was launched. One tech banker dismisses facial recognition to the FT as kindergarten stuff, compared to what will come next. Then talking about the Uyghurs, Tahir Hamid, a Uyghur poet and filmmaker who fled China, is now based in the US, tells the FT about the day he and his wife were ordered to visit their local police station and leave voice recordings, fingerprints, DNA swabs, and of course, high-resolution video footage of their faces making various expressions. Mandatory surveillance softwares installed on residents' mobile phones to scan for Islamic keywords and pictures. Some people tell the FT that anyone found to have shared illicit material would be sent to the region's extensive network of extra-legal detention camps, where tens of thousands of Uyghurs have already been imprisoned. Making too many phone calls to or from anywhere outside Xinjiang can also result in detention. As a result, the Uyghurs living in Xinjiang can go years without speaking to family members working in coastal cities like Beijing or Shanghai. Facial recognition, intrusive as it is only one of the tools the authorities are using to monitor residents. Last year, police were told to conduct DNA swabs, iris scans, and blood tests using a specially designed mobile app and health checks in order to build a region-wide biometric database. It's quite an extraordinary situation, actually. The rise of mass surveillance yields reams of data, and therein lies one of the big dangers for any country going down this road, says Noel O'Connor, Chief Executive of US-based Center for Democracy and Technology. The risks are the creation of a pervasive and permanent database of individual images for law enforcement, but then used for other purposes, perhaps by government actors. Last year I was saying how Xinjiang was a laboratory experiment in control and surveillance matters. And I was saying, in March, China has unveiled a digital panopticon in Xinjiang. Descent is measured and snuffed out very quickly in China. China has unveiled a digital panopticon in Xinjiang where a combination of data from video surveillance, face and license plate recognition, mobile service locations, and official records to identify targets for detention Xinjiang, I said, is surely a precursor for how the CCCP will manage dissent. Also in that article I was talking about Xi Jinping setting out his stall, deploying sharp power rather than soft power. In that article I was talking about the base race across the Indian Ocean. Now let's go back to Trump. He's now who has turned his attention to Xi Jinping and thrown in the keys, challenging him to a chicky run. His latest suggestion is that he's ready to impose tariffs on every Chinese import, according to the Washington Post. Have a listen to this. This is the ODNI, Dan Coates, speaking at the Aspen Institute about the Helsinki summit. Trump says, I had a great meeting with Putin. The fake news used every bit of their energy to try and disparage it. So bad for our country. Take you back to my piece in December 2016. We have a DV8 Tomahawk. And this tweet caught my attention. RIS in 2016 executed an incredibly aggressive, clandestine destabilization campaign against the US election, encompassing DESA, active measures, moles, agents placed all over DC, and classic Czechist spy methods. One truly for the record books, an epic Kremlin spy war success. Putin hedges Trump bet by dumping treasuries to safeguard assets. Liquidated dollar assets to a record pace, selling 4/5 of its cash of US government debt, worth $81 billion over a 2-month period. Jeff Sachs, he does seem in la-la land. Dementia is quite possible. On the other hand, many psychiatrists have told me that he is a psychopath, decompensating under Mueller's pressure, and many investigative reporters are quite convinced he's owned by Russia. Hard to be sure. And I said, dear Jeff Sachs, I think he has a daddy issue, which makes him admire the strong man, Putin, Kim, Duterte, Erdogan. Brett Stevens in the New York Times says, I supported Ambassador John Bolton and Mike Pompeo when they were elevated to their current jobs. In the wake of the Helsinki disgrace, I'm calling on them to resign, to save what's left of their honor and integrity. And I said, dear Brett, look for the photo where Ambassador John Bolton was served up on a silver platter to Vladimir. It's really sophisticated political triangulation. And the optics are undeniable and irrefutable. 10-year JGB is currently on pace for its biggest single-day move in over a year and a half, going back to before yield curve control came into place. Sharp move which strengthened the yen against the dollar, took it back to 111. Have a look at this chart from Bloomberg. Let's take a quick look at the currency markets. Euro dollar 117.30. Dollar index 94.36. Japanese yen 111 the figure. Swiss franc 0.9918. The pound 131.42. The Australian dollar 0.7415. Indian rupee 68.735. South Korean won 1130.83. The rial 376.85. Egyptian pound 17.9135, South African rand 13.4238. I follow Pine Cone Macro, and he's saying that the dollar index is at a very interesting spot right now. My challenge is that, we've rejected levels just close to 96 3 times, sometimes helped by Trump. The euro jumped yesterday, on Friday, of course, above 117 as Trump attacked high interest rates in a tweet after CNBC interview. The US should be allowed to recapture what was lost due to illegal currency manipulation and bad trade deals. Last trading 117.31. The problem for the euro is the differential between European 2-year yields and US 2-year yields, which keep widening. T commodity has a target for 118.50 for the euro dollar. Let's move on to commodity markets. Gold last trading around the 1230 level, strong rebound from the lows WTI crude oil for September delivery trading at $68.18. Brent $73.01. Cobalt has taken a real dive in the last 2 months. Look at this chart. S&P affirms Russia at BBB minus, 1 notch above junk. Stable outlook citing solid external and public balance sheets. Shanghai right now from a bar way up high in the IFC building in Pudong. That's from Howard French. Emerging market stocks versus the US dollar. Take a look. We wish a warm welcome to President Xi Jinping and First Lady Peng Liyuan. It is a pleasure to host you and further strengthen the already very good ties between our two nations and peoples. President Kagame, quite a lovely photograph as well. Zimbabwe's July 30 presidential election will provide no clear winner, with 40% of voters choosing President Emerson Mnangagwa and 37% his opponent Nelson Chamisa, according to the latest Afrobarometer poll. 20% of voters, it's not clear what 20% of people's voting intentions are. I think, given the speed and the rebound that we're seeing out of Chamisa, that it's now his moment. In point of fact, I think this is part of this Abiy mania, this zeitgeist I've previously spoken about. I think the Zimbabweans are going to want to change. Zimbabwe presidential election too close to call. That's from Edward Copley, Afrobarometer. And I go back to something I wrote in November 2017 when I said, the choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history, Richard Kapuscinski. And essentially, I think, the military who launched this decapitation, and I said then in November, are certainly set to shape the outcome, but now have a tiger by the tail. Chamisa's well ahead in the lead, they certainly do. Zimbabwe's broken dreams, an article in the Financial Times. Very hard-hitting. Pity Zimbabwe, for more than 30 years, its people have endured deepening poverty, rampant corruption, and systematic human rights abuses. Nothing has matched for scale or wanton brutality the slaughter in the early 80s of some 15,000 men, women, and children in the southern province of Matabeleland by soldiers of the North Korea-trained 5th Brigade. And no single act has done more to widen the divide between the Ndebele-speaking people of the region, long an opposition stronghold, and the Shona-speaking majority in the rest of the country, a divide all but certain to be reflected in the election due at the end of this month. And then speaks saying, this is a book about Zimbabwe. Doran says that from the beginning of the Matabeleland slaughter, Mugabe's point man, who chaired the Joint High Command, played a key role in the campaign against ZAPU and its armed wing ZIPRA. Doran damningly concludes that the man now seeking support at the ballot box provided the day-to-day bridge between the political leadership and the killers in the security services. Look at this photograph of a T-shirt in downtown Johannesburg with the photo of Prime Minister Abiy. That was from Edward Cropley. And I've been saying that I think Abiy's arrival is the most consequential arrival of a politician in sub-Saharan Africa since 1994, when Mandela walked out of prison. Ethiopia's beer black market rate evaporates as confidence booms. Hard currency amnesty, reform-driven confidence in Ethiopia's economy, both at home and abroad, have helped close a once yawning gap between the official and the black market exchange rates for its beer currency. As cash, in some cases, briefcases full of dollars, pours into banks, local businesses say they are finally feeling relief from a foreign exchange crunch that has seen some segments of the economy grind to a halt. All of a sudden this is happening, said one real estate agent whose business had come to a standstill over the past year. I'm not sure of the source of the foreign exchange, but psychologically the scarcity mentality has changed overnight. The government this week also opened a diaspora fund bank account and is asking Ethiopians abroad to contribute. And the UAE last month agreed to deposit $1 billion in Ethiopia's central bank. It really is a tremendous turnaround. The manager at Commercial Bank of Ethiopia told me, "We are very liquid right now. Let me show you an example." Nearby 3 bank employees were counting bills from a briefcase packed with $1 million in cash that a client had brought in earlier in the day. After 18 years, Ethiopian man finds his family in Eritrea. What an extraordinary photograph. South African all shares down 4.23% year to date. Dollar versus rand, as I said, 13.4727. Egypt's Sisi says false rumors are the main threat to Arab countries. The real danger is blowing up countries from within, he said. Nigerian all share down 4.29% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange is plus 10.98% year to date. Shares in Acacia have lost 75% of the value since Tanzania introduced the metal concentrate export ban. It's been a year since Acacia Mining's majority shareholder started talks on its behalf to end the standoff with the Tanzanian government. An interim chief executive officer, Peter Geleta, is getting frustrated. Not being in the room is extremely frustrating, he said by phone. We're obviously disappointed that the initial timetable given by Barrick has not been met. Shares in Acacia lost 75% of their value since Tanzania introduced the metal concentrate export ban, and relations soured further after the government slapped the miner with a $190 billion tax bill. Listen to this. Acacia said earlier this year it received approaches from Chinese companies interested in its assets in the country, and it started talks with a handful of potential investors about a possible sale of a stake in one or more of its mines. There's unlikely to be much progress on those talks or the company's ambitions to expand elsewhere in Africa until there's a resolution with the Tanzanian government, Geleta said. Mauritian firm gets the nod to buy Uganda Telecom. The island nation of Mauritius has set itself apart as the wealthiest country on the African continent on a per capita basis. AFDB Group's president, Akin Adesina, is seen making comments about the private sector in this little video footage I shot at an event where I was moderating on Friday. And then subsequently we met Mr. and Mrs. Adesina for dinner, and I'm grateful for that. And let me give Fenice a shout out for arranging that. The bank's current investment portfolio in Kenya is $3.1 billion. Akin Adesina says the media should focus on showcasing what's working in Africa. President Kenyatta directed freezing all new government projects until ongoing ones are complete. National Treasury to authorize any new project. And that decision, I think, was made after a visit from President Adesina. And as I said to him, I said, the few presidents I imagine who would take advice as they would take it from you. Safaricom ports its M-Pesa platform into Ethiopia, was my piece over the weekend. It has been no secret that Safaricom has been looking to unlock the geographical expansion opportunity. I recall the chairman indicating as much early last year. The story has been on background for a while. In one of its finest financial interventions, DFID, via its Financial Deepening Challenge Fund, awarded Vodafone a grant of nearly £1 million, which was required to be matched by Vodafone to begin developing a product that would leverage mobile phone technology to deliver financial services in East Africa. I recall as if it were yesterday Michael Joseph taking out his phone, walking me through probably the very first iteration of M-Pesa and saying, "We think it will be very sticky. Stickiness is a good thing, you will find." You could say that again. In fact, I recall a time when Airtel came calling and launched an irrational price war. And one of the reasons that price war went down in flames was the stickiness of M-Pesa. Of course, M-Pesa has metasized from being largely an in-country money remittance service The flow was one where folks working in our cities needed to move money to their families who were dispersed out of town and typically deep in the countryside. M-Pesa was serving a need, and the service at its inception was a leapfrog-level improvement. It was doing the transfer in the now versus maybe a 24 or even 36-hour process of handing your hard-earned moolah to a matatu driver or tout to deliver. Consider how the velocity of money accelerated and how it improved livelihoods at the fringes. MIT has done some outstanding research on the upliftment, in particular at the fringes. Since then, M-Pesa has driven our financial inclusion numbers off the charts, and the M-Pesa economy has grown by leaps and bounds. M-Pesa is integrated with the banks. The PayPal partnership has meant that anyone anywhere with a Safaricom connection can transact with the world. Many folks talk about democratization, and I can think of no finer example of that characterization. I visited Kakuma refugee camp, the furthest north I'd ever visited. And I kept thinking this place is so far from anywhere. And then I realized, but it's not, because everyone is connected. The velocity of money has surged, and I reckon M-Pesa has added more than 1.5% to the GDP score consistently every year. M-Pesa has been a growth engine. Whenever there's a cash transaction, we see an opportunity. Transaction value in 2017 doubled. We are building the ecosystem to monetize tomorrow, said Satish on the occasion of the release of their full year numbers. M-Pesa full year revenue expanded 14.2% to clock $624 million. Is currently responsible for 27.83% of Safaricom's total revenue. Now, something can be a no-brainer, but it's also about timing your market entry. On the 6th of June, I wrote Safaricom PLC. This can add up to 20% to Safaricom's share price. It's a big deal. Ethiopia's a 100 million market and ripe for the taking for M-Pesa in particular. What has changed in Ethiopia is, of course, firstly the arrival of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, whose arrival I rate as the most consequential arrival of any African politician since 1994, and when Mandela exited prison, and soon thereafter became president of the Rainbow Nation. PM Abiy has made so many pivots, it's head spinning, but he has read the writing on the wall when it came to the economy. He saw that notwithstanding the stellar growth numbers, it was running on empty. FX reserves were down to weeks of import cover. He had to make a move, and pronto. I was at lunch that CAPSA hosted for the president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, and we agreed that growth was a silver bullet. And for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and for his counterpart in Asmara, President Isaias Afwerki, they need growth. It will provide wind in their sails. And what we know is mobile money is seriously stimulative at the grassroots. Reuters reported last week Kenya Safaricom is in advanced talks with the Ethiopian government to introduce its popular M-Pesa mobile money service to Ethiopia, a market of 100 million. Vodafone will license the use of M-Pesa's trade name to an Ethiopian-based bank, while Safaricom will host the service in Nairobi. Ethiopia's state telecoms monopoly, Ethio Telecom, will carry the service, the source added. Started in 2007, M-Pesa's nearly 30 million users in Kenya. I concluded by saying it is Abiy Mania which has opened the Ethiopian door wide open for Safaricom and Kenya Inc., and that it's a singular moment. Safaricom's share price data is also on rich wrap-ups, plus the full year results, plus the M-Pesa information. Nairobi all shares up 0.68% year to date. The market is currently trading at a price to earnings ratio of 14.3 and a dividend yield of 3.8%. That's from Saiton. NSE 20 is down 10.7% year to date. Stanbic increases Kenya's shareholding to 68% in a tender to shareholders. They've applied to continue buying shares through the NSE to reach 75%. For the February 2018 Eurobond issue during the week, the yields on the 10 and 30-year remained unchanged at 7.4 and 8.5%. Yields on the 91-day, 182-day, and 364-day T-bills declined by 4.5 basis points, 12.8 basis points, and 14.3 basis points. For the month of July 2018, the Kenya government has issued a new 20-year Treasury bond with the coupon rate set at 13.2%. Tourist activity: Europe is the largest source of tourists, 517,300 last year. Africa, 285,000. Asia, 198,000. North America, 180,700. And with that, I shall take my leave. Thank you for stopping by.